right. Well, I am going to get started just because I know that we have a very not tight time frame, but I definitely want to make use of every minute I have with you. And so I just want to take this opportunity to say hello and welcome you to NiftyLit in Conversation with Erin Jamieson. My name is Katie Ziegler. I am the editor-in-chief of NiftyLit, and I am lucky enough to share this space with this wonderful, witty, remarkable, emotional writer that her piece is just so spectacular. We are so lucky to bring it into the world with her. Over the last year that NiftyLit has been in existence, we have been so inspired by the writers who have shared their work with us, and Erin's prose poetry collection is no exception. Clothesline is the third of our long form publications that we have published, and we are so delighted to share it with you and to share Erin with you all tonight. In her prose poetry collection, Clothesline, what I love about it is that it is sort of sits at the intersection of memory, of family, and of loss, but it's investigated in such a loving way that allows us to feel the narrator's vulnerability and strength in equal measures. The act of putting clothes on a clothesline is utilized as a way of experiencing this family's past, as well as sort of setting them up for what the future might hold for them. One of my favorite lines from the piece is, "I didn't know that it would be 5 long years before I would step foot into their kitchen again. The more cracked and the pale blue walls, the tiles more cracked and the pale blue walls paler, or that Mama would take my coat before introducing herself." There's such an economy to Erin's prose that never belies the depths that it reaches. And so this is just such a wonderful opportunity for me to even be in conversation with Erin, let alone the rest of our audience. A little about Erin: she holds an MFA in creative writing from Miami University of Ohio. Her writing has been published in over 80 literary magazines, and her fiction has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. She teaches at The Ohio State University, and we are so lucky to have her be such a wonderful part of the NiftyLit family. I would love to have Erin read a bit from Clothesline for us to start off. And then I am going to just enter into I want to keep it very casual and very informal. I'm going to ask questions about her writing process, about Clothesline in particular, and also just about her and her writing life and her inspirations. I would also love to open it up for questions and answers at the end. And so if you do have a question, you can opt to either put it in the chat, and then I can say, oh, Joe has a question. Or if you would like to do that little fancy thing that sort of raises your hand, that little emoji that raises your hand, that will let me know that you would like to ask a question as well. I will ask everyone to mute themselves just so we don't have what I know will probably be my dog barking in the background at some point, or Erin's cat making a surprise appearance. So if you don't mind muting, that would be wonderful. But I would love to just take this opportunity to welcome Erin with much love and much respect from all of us at NiftyLit.
Well, thank you. So do you just want me to read a couple pages? Oh, do you have a question? Does Adam have a question?
I think it's love.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I was clapping. That was a clap. My fault.
Okay, I misread the emoji.
No, Erin, read as much as you would like. We are your rapt audience.
Okay. I hang Mama's dress on the clothesline carefully, not to crease the cotton, willing the sun to dry stains from bourbon and cigarette ashes. If Papa notices, he doesn't tell me, and we keep it that way. A private but public exhibit. A cream-colored collar whose lace snags and starts to unravel, and unraveling neither of us can stop. In 3 hours, the dress will be dry, and Papa and I will dress Mama and tell her she looks beautiful, take photos that we'll bury in our house and toss into the fireplace when she sleeps again. Sometimes I imagine Mama understands me, remembers the afternoon we gathered dandelion dust with our hands, or the day we created snow ice cream when we didn't have money left to buy a store-bought pint. Sometimes she starts to smile, and I imagine she is there with me again, grasping for what little is left or ever was. Sorry, hold on just a second. Get off. I know you want to know what happened to Mama. You will wonder why she spends all day flipping through decade-old catalogs or why she doesn't remember her daughter's name. But the truth is never so simple. Maybe Papa lies when he says she will never recover or that this is just a spell. Maybe I lie when I say none of this is my fault. Either way, Mama is how she is now, and there's no telling you why or how that will change. When I was 5, Mama taught me how to cook. Pasta first, a box of penne dumped in a pot of tap water. Everything went fine until I dumped the entire jar of ragu, and it was more like drinking tomato sauce. She didn't give up on me, and by the time I was 10, I could cook chicken, seafood, even steak. I hate cooking as much as she hated it, and when I asked her why we had to cook if Papa liked it more, she never answered. She just said there are some things you learn to do. She told me you couldn't rely on men. So those are the first couple poems. Sorry, my cow was trying to invade again.
Thank you so much, Erin. I think that what I would love to know is your book creates such a beautiful lens by which to sort of examine and experience this family and the dynamics of this family. What was it about this particular family in your literary mind that you wanted to explore as the author?
I really liked the complex dynamics between identity and guilt. So this young woman who's the narrator kind of grows up in a family who loves each other, but they also have very certain expectations of each other. And so she felt like she never lived up to her mother's expectations in particular. So when her mother starts suffering from memory loss, some form of dementia, there's a lot of, resentment and guilt and memories that start coming out, because I really wanted to explore that cognitive dissonance, that difficulty processing the emotion of really loving someone in your life and wanting to be there for them, but they're also the same person that hurt you and they can't even remember that hurt. So I was really interested in how memory informs how we treat other people, how our identity changes over time. And I would also say the narrator experiences a lot of different identities. She's the daughter from overprotective parents, then she's a student, then she's trying to live her own life, but she still feels like she's being pulled back into her old life. So she's trying to navigate, how do I figure this out now? How can I still love my mother, but also resent some things that we did in the past?
I think it's so interesting because I think that this piece could have been very successful had the investigation been of this mother-daughter dynamic, just in terms of the guilt, in terms of childhood expectations that perhaps weren't realized in that parental relationship. What was the impetus for the choice to add the extra dimension that I think makes this such a spectacular piece, which is that memory loss added layer that I think just deepens every aspect of that relationship? Where did that idea come from to add that into the experience?
I think, partially I had a great aunt. I mean, she lived to a wonderful age, but I got to experience, she was a very brilliant woman. And so I kind of went through learning and kind of experienced that loss of memory and how people, cling to it or try to remind people of it. So definitely was somewhat influenced by that. But I think I've always been really mesmerized by how we all, even us that don't suffer from, memory loss, we all remember things in different ways. And the way we remember things is very much colored by our self-perception and emotions. And to be honest, I think I drew a lot on my own sense of memory and reconstructing it for myself. I've suffered with severe depression. and also an eating disorder. And so my experience of mental illness, I sometimes have to go back and challenge and re-see things and reimagine, rethink, because I was in a different place at different times and people remember it differently. So I think a lot of that really informed my interest in it. And also, on a side note, I took some cognitive psychology classes, so that might be also why I'm kind of interested in memory.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think that helps to sort of normalize and to bring it up and to share it with others. I really applaud that. Thank you so much. And I think what I can see from this and my own experience with depression and anxiety, is that you do kind of live different lives and different identities throughout those experiences, that I see so beautifully mirrored in this narrator. Like you said, we have the daughter, we have the loving daughter, the broken daughter, the student, the trying to become the leader of the family, trying to investigate sort of the background of her parents' relationship. She puts on many figurative hats throughout this piece, which to me gets us to what I think is so brilliant is this clothesline metaphor that you utilize throughout of sort of donning different outfits and who we become in those outfits and who we become when we hang them up in the closet to never look at again. Was the clothesline always in the back of your mind when you were crafting this, or was that a happy surprise?
Well, it all started with me just writing a single poem about a clothesline.
Okay.
And
is that in this collection?
Yes.
Oh, it is. Okay.
So, I mean, I think it didn't even start off, and this kind of happens honestly with my novels. Sometimes I'll just have like a singular image or idea, and then I just start writing, and I kind of see, does it go somewhere, doesn't it? So I think what ended up happening is I kind of tried to extend that metaphor, and then I kind of tried to think, okay, what could this mean? Where could this lead? So I kind of worked backwards. I didn't know at first what it meant, and then I kind of thought about the process of, there's just something extra special about using a clothesline, versus, using laundry machines, taking things in and out. And I thought that it was a fascinating image, and I just kind of wanted to follow it and see where it went with it. So,
and your choice of first person, I think, was very, very smart in this, because we do get such a close, we then become much closer to the narrator by virtue of sort of our access to her brain and her thought processes and the ways that she sees the world. What were you always first person? Is that a point of view that you like to write in? Was it uncomfortable for you? Where are you on the first person spectrum?
no, I've tried most different, I've tried a lot of different perspectives. I do think I have a preference for first person, actually, both in my poetry and in my fiction. I just feel closer to the character. There are times where I feel like I want more distance, and so I'll do like a different type of narrative voice. But I feel like with something this personal, and especially grappling, especially with the guilt and the emotional turmoil, I felt like I really needed that first person. And I also like a lot of times using present tense, which is different. I thought that was kind of interesting. That was something that I think took a little getting used to kind of think about that, even though we're talking about memories, kind of being in the moment too.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I definitely have a predisposition towards first person, although I've tried second unsuccessfully several times.
That's one that I think I wrote a poem. I've written a couple poems in it before, but I feel maybe that'll be my next experiment when I'm doing my manuscript. It's very difficult for me.
It's very difficult. Same thing for me. I've only used it in Flash because I feel like I just can't sustain it for much longer. Yeah, I get sort of in the weeds a little bit with second person. Speaking of sort of point of view and some of the more technical aspects of your work and of writing, I'm so intrigued and impressed with the prose poetry as the genre for this piece. And I think it works so beautifully to have these short and yet intensely deep and porous pieces that are given to us in this collection. Did you set out with prose poetry in mind, or is that something that as you kept working, you began to settle into that particular genre?
So I guess I've played a lot with prose poetry. I think I kind of started like way before this collection. When I first started, just like even writing on a more serious level, like getting into high school and college, I was a fiction person. I did not like poetry. I wasn't going to write poetry. So I think for me, it kind of served as a bridge. And I was really inspired after reading some Claudia Rankin, and I realized like how many different things poetry could be. Um, and I like all different, I like free verse, regular free verse poetry of line breaks. But I felt like for this, I really liked the format because I liked the idea of moments being intense but fragmented. And I think that it went a lot with the memory, even the memory gain and loss of the mother, moments of revelation, but also that life is full of moments. It's full of moments pieced together. And there's something about that form that I really like because it feels both, it's cohesive when you put it all together, but it also feels a little bit fragmented and fragile.
I agree. And what I loved in addition to a myriad things about this piece is that then I found myself long after reading the collection, not only being so taken with each of those separate pieces, but then trying to fill in the blanks of the in-betweens, and really trying to engage with what I would imagine was happening in between and how she was feeling and what was happening. And I feel like that's such a hallmark of a successful piece when you want to kind of do the math in your own head about what you imagine is happening for these characters. Did you have, as you were writing this, did you know that there was an end point? Like, do you work towards the finish line, or do you just happily get there?
So it kind of depends. I am notoriously bad about with a lot of my writing projects kind of going in without too much of a plan. I had a general idea of how I wanted it to end. I had no idea how I was going to get there. So it was kind of more when I'm writing, sometimes I'll start getting a feeling that something is winding down, that I've explored a lot of the tension I want to, and it feels like it's at a good point. So I know that sounds really crazy and really vague. But especially for poetry, because with fiction, you can do that to an extent, but there are, a decent amount of limitations more so.
Right.
And so with this, it was kind of like an in between. It wasn't quite as freeing, I would say, as like a non-narrative poetry collection. Um, but I felt like I had hit emotional points. And I think what happened was I started writing a couple more poems. And even, when I was going for an editing and took some out, I felt like I was starting to kind of repeat some things I'd already explored. And sometimes less is more. So it was kind of just getting that feeling of, I explored a lot of what I wanted to, and I feel like it's starting to meet its resolution.
Mhm. That's, I love that because I think it can both be a blessing and a curse to have an ending in mind often. I think sometimes even in my own work, if I do have what I think is just a wonderful ending, I then tend to put blinders on my way there, and I don't allow any other possibilities to take place. So I do think there's something so delicious about just letting the piece evolve as it goes, and finding that ending much more naturally than necessarily plotting it out, particularly I think with prose poetry and with poetry, where we're along for the ride. And it is shorter than potentially a novel or a collection. And so I think it was such a smart choice on your part for this piece. Um, you had said again, with the technicalities of sort of plotting or not plotting, is there a particular process to your writing? Do you have particular and this is going to sound strange, I know, but I think all of us as writers tend to have little rituals or little superstitions or ways that we get into the world of the piece. Do you have any of those? I would love to know.
Well, and this is the weirdest thing for me is like, so to begin with, ideas hit me at pretty much the most random times. I'll be browsing a bookstore, I'll be going on for a walk, I've had dreams about different things, and I'll just write it down. But as far as a writing regimen, I actually do. I try to write at least 2 to 3 poems every day. And I've gone back and forth on how much prose I write in a day, because I've done it to the point of exhaustion before, especially when I was freelance writing too. But now I average about, when I'm working on a manuscript, I average about 3 pages a day, 6 days a week, give myself a day off. And yeah, I pretty much do that number, and sometimes I go a little bit over. But I do believe that for me, it's good for me to have a routine. I don't make myself write it at a certain time of the day or anything like that. I do love the idea of writing in notebooks and such, but admittedly, I pretty much type on my Mac because my handwriting is atrocious, and I don't want to go through that again. When I was in 8th grade, I wrote my first novel, and I was bad, and I brought in like a spiral notebook, and I wrote it during science class. So, and I handwrote that entire novel.
Oh my God.
And then I typed it up afterwards. That was not a pleasant experience. So long story short, as much as I love the idea of handwriting things, I don't do that.
I
So that
don't either. I don't either. I wish it sounds so romantic, right? There's such a sort of charm to that sort of vision of writing things longhand, but no, I don't do that either. And I find that my brain's working too quickly to keep up with my handwriting often, and I don't want to miss anything, and then I start to get self-conscious of my handwriting, so it ends up just being sort of a nightmare. Uh-huh. I cannot believe that you write that much every day. I mean, I can believe it, but I'm just so impressed with that because I do not have, I see Joe nodding as well. I don't have that discipline in my own writing. I find that it sort of fits and starts, and I'll have very, very fertile periods. And then I don't know, there's days that it just doesn't come. And I'm always so in awe of writers who have that discipline just to keep the faucet running so that the water's warm much more often than it is for me. Have you always been that way? Have you always been a disciplined writer?
Yes, I would say my entire life I'm a little bit over disciplined, perhaps. Something that's helpful to me though is having a couple different, this sounds crazy, but having it like being able to work on poetry projects and also being working on prose. I find that prose actually exhausts me more, so it's really necessary to give myself breaks. I also though am of the very firm opinion that different things work for different people. And you have to kind of find what works for you. There's some people that literally I mean, they write more than me. They'll write every day for hours on end. And that to me sounds, it's a little bit like kind of going back to, I used to also do freelance writing, which was a nice side income, but honestly, it exhausted me because I was doing freelance writing, I was teaching and doing videos and then trying to do creative work, and my level of creativity was so low. It was so low. Like I was forcing myself to do it because I felt like I had to, but it wasn't pleasant. So another thing I will say is a lot of days I don't feel like writing, but once I start writing, I pretty much enjoy it. So I think that's the other thing. It's kind of like if it's a day you don't feel like getting out of bed or whatever, it's maybe not pleasant at first, but you kind of do it. And I guess at the end of the day too, even when I take breaks, I force myself to take breaks. I just miss it so much. Like some days I don't like writing, but I also feel like I have to do it because it's like part of who I am. It's part of my life. So
So I must ask about this eighth grade novel because I'm very impressed that you wrote one in the eighth grade. But I would love to, if you're willing to share what that novel was about, I would love to know.
Um, so it was like this, I guess it was very middle grade, which works because I was in middle grade, and it was like this girl discovers that like her family was hiding a secret about her, and when she was like younger, she made some like terrific scientific discovery, but like she forgot about it or something. It was really not the best, but I will say it was a fast plot, unlike that's what I struggle with now. So it's a very fastly paced little novel. I actually read it, oh gosh, I reread it like about a year ago, not the whole thing, couldn't do that. But I was like, it's kind of bad, but I expected it to be worse. It's a relic.
Yeah.
So
Mhm. I love that you're admitting that, like, then the plot came so quickly and easily, and now maybe that's not as much of the case, which is entirely the case of my own writing as well. Do you have particular things when you're writing that have evolved over time? Do you feel like there are certain aspects of writing that come more easily to you now, or certain aspects that you find are a little bit more difficult as a writer now at the sort of as you at your stage of writing?
yeah, so I used to be a notorious overwriter. And what I mean by that is like I was obsessed with like descriptive words and just like overloading. And something that I really learned was less is more sometimes. So I think I've gotten it, my style is pared down like greatly, like enormously. And I also think I never was like truly bad at it, except for maybe my eighth grade novel. But I used to worry about dialogue like in my fiction, and now I kind of just it's like the least of my worries. And then on the other hand, like I said, I feel like I've become more self-aware of like, oh, is there enough happening or is there too much happening, and worrying about the plot, which is why, again, I kind of enjoy, even though not so much with this collection, but in general, I like the freedom that poetry offers, where you don't have to worry quite as much about that. I think I overthink some of my writing more than I used to. So that's always a struggle. But I think that my writing quality is improved, but I also think I'm more worried about it.
I think that happens though. I think that unfortunately that's sort of the wicked stepsister of feeling better at your writing is then you start to have even more anxiety around it. When you were in your MFA program, were you in a particular genre in that program, or were you sort of multidisciplinary?
Yeah, so we had to pick a genre, and when I first entered, I had taken maybe like one poetry class or something like that. Yeah, I was fiction.
Okay.
I like 100% fiction, and then I took more poetry classes and kind of fell in love with it. But my thesis was a novel. And I did take a nonfiction course, which I really was also I have this habit of being resistant to things before I try them, and then I realize, oh, it's really good I tried that. So I've actually written quite a bit of nonfiction like here and there too. It's not my strongest, but I think all those experiences are good.
I do too, and I think it can bleed over into sort of our chosen genre as well. I had the same experience taking a nonfiction class in my MFA program that was so helpful to me, sort of stylistically in some of my fiction. There were things that I learned in my voice in nonfiction that I could bring into the fiction in many ways, which I found really, really helpful. What would you say was your greatest or most welcome takeaway from your MFA program? Was there something that you learned, something you take away from that experience that you feel is still kind of behooving you in your writing today?
I think the ability to experiment a little bit. So I came in and I was like, I'm gonna write traditional fiction That's all I want to do. That's all I want to read. And I had to, actually, a lot of people in the program were more into experimental writing. And initially, I actually kind of I thought I hated experimental writing, and then I discovered I didn't. So that was probably the main takeaway, is honestly just be more flexible, try new things. You don't have to like everything, but even try things that you think you're going to be really bad at. I think that's actually really important. I think for me, since I've lived a lot of my life feeling like I have to be really good at everything, and I'm a failure if I don't succeed. Writing is full of failures. You're not going to ever get anywhere without failing a billion times, especially in the creative works. And so I actually think the ability to do that and not be afraid and put myself out there, and also write about some really personal things, especially in the nonfiction class, that was hard to open up. But luckily it was a very small program. Professors were excellent. So yeah, I think it was a really growing experience, also just on a emotional and personal level, being able to do that.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Oh, I see Joe has a question. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, are you ready for me to ask?
Yes,
Katie?
go.
Erin, thank you so much for this. This is awesome. There's my 4-year-old screaming in the background. But I was wondering about some of the pieces in Clothesline were published in other publications prior to being published as a full body of work. Was there, like, were you sort of picking which ones that you sent out or that you thought stood on their own, or were you kind of just like doing wide submissions?
No, I think at that time I wasn't really sure it was going to be a collection. So I wrote, maybe a few of them, and I was like, yeah, these are kind of different than I usually do, which is like, see if anyone thinks they're of interest of any kind. And then I guess over time I kept writing more and more that were following this narrative thread, and then I thought maybe I should just make this into a collection. So it was very much me thinking that they were just going to be single poems, and then deciding to make it into a long form.
Awesome. I mean, you spoke on this a little bit, but were you sort of writing this in conjunction with other projects, and then like it would come to you and be like, okay, this is the next sort of piece for this?
Yes, I'm pretty sure I was working on a manuscript, a prose manuscript of some kind at that point.
Yeah, cool. I have another one. Is that okay, Katie? Okay. We were chatting at the beginning of the call today, and you were talking about some of the different hats that you wear with some of teaching, and then some of your projects with The Sims. Do you feel like, and you did talk a little bit about your writing process, but do you feel like you're almost writing from two different, like your writing persona is different than like the person who's doing The Sims, and do you have various different things that you do to like get into those personas to prepare for the work?
Well, my biggest fear is that one day I'm going to be recording a lecture or teaching my students and say something like my YouTube channel name or something. So I do have weird fears like that, but I would actually say that I don't know. I feel like with since I'm going for like more news and commentary and do some like research in the Sims channel, it's becoming a little bit more like I'm just deeply interested in keeping up with news, and it reminds me of like taking psychology classes. So no, I really don't feel like it's different. I think the most awkward thing for me, I feel like the writing is seamless too, because a lot of people in the Sims community apparently love to write. I even started a Discord server for some writers, which has been a little quiet lately, but that seems natural. I think the thing that seems the least natural is the teaching crossover. I feel like just I don't know how to put this. Academia can feel a little stiff at times. I'm absolutely blessed in my current position. And I was really blessed at Miami too. They were very welcoming in my program. But it is weird to think about that position versus like making Sims videos. I feel like the Sims videos and the creative writing, in other words, have more crossover, but a lot of people tell me I kind of sound like a teacher in my Sims videos, so maybe it just all goes together. I'm not sure. That was a roundabout answer, but
Oh, that was awesome.
yeah.
I'm curious, in addition to this collection, Sims, you're teaching, what are you writing now? What is a project, or do you have multiple projects going at once?
So I, for a while, was working on revising and refining a manuscript I'd written over the fall, which was middle grade. And that's a little bit different for me because I've been writing both adult and young adult, and I just felt like trying something different. So I was working on that. And I am currently starting I think I'm about like 76 pages in to another middle grade, and it also has magical realism elements to it. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to be doing, like if I want to query any of those or not. I do have 2 full manuscripts, which I am, bracing for the full manuscript rejection. But I do have 2 full manuscripts out right now, still on submission. So I'm kind of waiting for those rejections before I kind of decide what I do next. And then on top of it, I am editing my novella that probably will be published in 2024 early-ish. It's a small press.
Oh, that's
So
fantastic. Congratulations. That's so wonderful.
yeah, and that was a weird one because I actually wrote that story. This is very unusual. Don't take it as usual. I actually wrote that about this time a little earlier, like last year. I was just thinking about a lot about the pandemic, and I was turning from 29 to 30, which felt like a big deal at the time. And that actually also has a magical realism element to it. So I think I'm really falling in love with elements of magical realism, which isn't too surprising because some of my favorite authors do use elements of that. So yeah, I guess I do have a lot of projects going on. Sometimes I don't realize how much I'm doing at once.
I just love, oh yeah, Joe just asked the question I was going to ask as well. Who are some of your favorite authors? Who is on your virtual kind of bulletin board of authors that you love?
So one of my favorites right now is Karen Thompson Walker. Why can I'm always like struggling to remember the titles of her books. It's the weirdest thing. And I adore her books. She's only had 2. Gosh, what is it? I'm blanking. Anyway, Karen Thompson Walker,
Okay.
Celeste Ng, I believe is
Oh,
how you pronounce her name. Absolutely
yes.
love her.
Yes.
I also like Kim Edwards. She wrote Memory Keeper's Daughter. This is on the more commercial side, I confess. I do like Jodi Picoult novels, or Picoult, I should say. And this is gonna sound really strange, but I grew up with this author. She's a middle grade author. She actually lives in my state, which I found out later down the road. Margaret Peterson Haddix. I still read her books to this day. She writes middle grade books, and I love them. And then I already mentioned I love Claudia Rankine. I like Maya Angelou. I like Margaret Atwood. And then like more classics, I'm a big Faulkner fan. So yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
and I didn't mention I love Murakami as well. I
Okay.
how to
Okay.
pronounce his first name. I apologize.
Yes. So tell me more about Faulkner. How did Faulkner make his way into that list? Because that I would love to know that.
Honestly, we had to read The Sound and the Fury for high
Right.
school, and a lot of people absolutely hated it, and I loved it. It was such a bizarre book. I remember when I was reading, it was like, what is this? But I was just so fascinated by it. So, and then I kind of just continued reading Faulkner books after that. So I know that Faulkner is not for everyone.
I do love when Faulkner surprises people, though. I teach A Rose for Emily in some of my first year composition classes, and it's always the biggest hit of the semester because it's so unexpected. I think people's expectation of Faulkner is that it's not going to make any sense and that it's going to, that we're not going to know when one character starts and another character ends. And it's very stylized, but he can surprise you. He can definitely surprise you with some pretty amazing characters in particular. His characters have stayed with me for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I got to read a range of his works. His youngest, when he was his youngest, it is pretty dramatically different as some of his later works. But yeah, and I actually kind of want to get back to reading some more classical works too, because I do have a number of offers. I really like Virginia Woolf as well.
Oh, me too. Oh, Keel, I see that you have a question. Go ahead.
Hi. I was wondering if you, because we had talked about different inspirations of yours. Do you have any uh, genres or any authors that you were looking into that you'd like to explore that you haven't already explored, or any themes that you would like to work with in the future?
Okay, so that's a lot. So are you saying like, are there more offers I want to read or emulate? Or I didn't catch the first part of that.
Yes, any authors that you'd be curious about their style or their influence on your writing that you haven't yet.
Yeah, so I'm trying to, I don't know why I'm blanking on everybody's names. There's been a book that I've been meaning to read for a long time. I can picture the cover of it. And I keep wanting to say it's All the Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born, but I know it's not that. Oh gosh. I can't remember, I'm sorry. But there is a specific book I have in mind that I know a lot of people have read. I kind of almost want to challenge myself to read some books that I have seen that are extremely popular that I don't think I'm going to like, just to kind of like challenge that resistance. And also maybe read in some genres I don't tend to read in, because I tend to read historical fiction, contemporary fiction, literary fiction. So it probably would be good for me to read some genre novels just to see what it's like, some mystery novels, maybe a thriller. I'm not saying I'm going to like it, but I think that could really challenge me and probably teach me things about plotting and pace, which I feel like I really struggle with still. So
Thank you, Keel. And Edith, I see you have a question. So nice to see you.
Hi, it's so nice to see you too, Katie. And Erin, thank you so much for this hour and for your piece, which is just beautiful. I'd like to ask another question about Clothesline, if it's okay to jump around subjects.
Absolutely.
Well, you mentioned before, just now you mentioned pacing, and before you talked about coming in your writing to a place of less is more. And I felt like Clothesline was a beautiful sequence of less is more. And I was curious about how you approach editing and in general. And then I was also curious about kind of both the pacing and the decision about points in time and how you mix them up. So
yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of editing, what I try to do is I try to think about my piece almost in sections and think about what do I want to accomplish in this section. And like I said, even though I think less so now, I do have the tendency to overwrite or to repeat. So I try to kind of keep track of, okay, what kind of emotional beats or plot beats have I already come? And almost, I don't make a literal outline, maybe I should, but in my head I kind of do. And I try to make sure I'm not repeating moments or scenes. So it's usually the biggest part is kind of weeding them out. On a line level, it's kind of focusing on what's the most, pick a couple images in your mind. Think about a few specific ones rather than trying to clutter the scene, which again is something that always is a struggle, I think. And so what I typically do, it's kind of like a process of pruning. Sometimes it's reading out loud too. So I tend to be, if I'm a little bit more verbose, I can catch it when I'm reading out loud and say, do I really need all those words? Do I need all that in that? So most of the time, every once in a while, there's some additions need to be made to further develop a character or something like that. But I tend to have to prune things out. With this piece, I did, like I said, I did not have a plan. And I wish I could tell you that I had this, grand outline of what moments I was gonna pick. I didn't. So I kind of just wrote it all out as it came to me. And then I kind of went through the process of pruning and arranging it.
Do you enjoy the editing process?
Nope.
No.
I'll be honest. Nope. I know a lot of people really enjoy, some people enjoy the editing process almost more than the writing process, I've heard.
Yes. Yes.
And they love it. And honestly, I'm like, I gotta edit it. It's painful because when I'm writing it, at least I'm just like, okay, don't look back going forward. That's because like in the past, it used to hold me back worrying about what I wrote. And with the editing, you're forced to engage with it. It's kind of how I feel about making videos as well. Not quite as painful, but you record it and it's fine. Then you go back and you have to listen to your voice and you have to kind of like, oh gosh. And I've gotten used to that, but it's kind of like the same painful process, right?
Yes.
And is it satisfying when it's done? Absolutely. Do I love the process? No, it's kind of like, okay, I have to do this. So it's a necessary evil.
It is.
Satisfying afterwards, but I wish I liked editing. I do not like editing.
I don't either. I think for me, I worry that it's sort of a house of cards. And if I take one card out, the whole thing is just going to collapse. And that I think I see a lot of nodding. That's my fear in the editing process. I'm curious, has there been someone in your life who fostered this love of literature for you, this love of storytelling? Or do you think it's just a gene that's in your body that has just led to the success and the work that you've created?
I think definitely my dad. He was a history major too, but he would read us stories all the time, like me and my older brother, before we went to bed. And it was like the most exciting time. And I was just wowed by it. And he actually has been working on, I don't know how he does this, but he's been working on a manuscript for like 15 or 20 years. It's like a fantasy novel and it's got like a full cast of characters, nothing like I do. But I think definitely from the beginning, like fostering a love of reading, writing, and also history. I greatly appreciate history, even though I'm a little skittish about writing historical fiction, maybe because he was a history major. And I feel like I have to get everything, exactly, absolutely right. But no, definitely my dad. Stereotypical answer, but very true.
No, I love that answer. Do you feel like there is a character from a book from your childhood that stays in your brain? I think I definitely have one that was sort of implanted in the folds of my brain as a kid. Is there a character that for you still inhabits part of your mind?
I was absolutely obsessed with Anna Green Gables. I wanted to
That's
be.
mine. Oh my gosh. I mean, at one point I announced to my parents that I was going to relinquish my American citizenship and I was going to move to I was probably like 8 and so precocious, but I was going to move to Prince Edward Island and I was going to find my Diana and I was going to meet Gilbert. Oh my gosh, yes. Just so life-changing for me as a young person.
Yeah, I loved her feisty spirit, her independence, that she's going to be a writer.
Yes.
And I also wanted her red hair.
Yes. I got her freckles. I didn't get her red hair. What has been has there been a piece of advice for you writing wise, whether that was in your MFA program, whether that was just a friend or a colleague that has sort of helped you in your writing life, or do you feel like you have been the one giving yourself your advice as a writer?
I definitely think that while it didn't like make or break, I think I have to admit, like going to an MFA program was a big difference. Having professors that felt like they deeply cared about me made a big difference too. I also had a teacher in junior high, like 7th grade or something, that she said you should really join. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's called Power of the Pen. It was like this writing competition, and I was like, I don't know. Typical me. I don't know. I don't really want to do that. But I did eventually try it, I think, in 8th grade. And I think that she went out of her way to tell me that she thought I had talent made a big difference. I think I've had a lot of little like people along the way. And even like today, I have good friends that express interest in my writing that I'm like, why would you even be interested? Just having people in your life. I have a couple good friends that have meant the world to me for helping me out.
I love that you had that teacher. I just love that because I mean, in our conversation like this with Adam, one of his most meaningful teachers was actually on the Zoom, and you'd never forget them. You never forget them. That one person who sort of shined a light on your talent and your possibilities, and it makes such a difference. So
Yeah,
we only have 2 minutes left, which is heartbreaking for me, and I don't want to hog the time. If anyone else had a question, please do put your little hand up, or you can throw it in the chat. But I am really curious, are there goals that you have as a writer, now that, because I feel like you are so wonderful at trying different genres, and I love this idea of reading things that might be challenging to you in order to sort of grow as a writer. Are there particular genres or projects that may not be in the near future, but are in perhaps the longer future for you as a writer, as a teacher, as a person?
I definitely, I'm not exactly sure where it's going to land. I definitely would like to get a novel with like a magical realism touch published to it. And I guess my goal is to get either get a literary agent or published by a big press of some kind, of some sort. But mostly I just hope that I end up publishing work that matters. And that even impacts, even if it's like 5 people's lives. That's really, really all I want and care the most about. And I think all writers want that deep down. All of us would like to be successful, but I think deep down we want to know that we mattered in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love how you articulated that. We do have one more question from Kyla. I can ask it, or Kyla, if you would like to ask that, I'm more than happy to pass the mic. All right, I will ask, do you have a favorite prose in Clothesline? Is there one that hits you a little bit differently than the rest of them?
That's an excellent question. I would say, I know we only have like 1 minute. Let me look.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Honestly, I would say, and this is stereotypical, I would say the last poem of the collection. It's basically reflecting back on everything, and it's the last lines is the feeling that I belong here, belong to the dark, or the possibility that Mama once stood here too, believing someone would come by and save us all from ourselves. So it's very much a bittersweet ending, I suppose, but also the realization that we can't always wait for someone. We have to take control of some of our lives too. And that's something really hard to, I guess, process. but I think I actually like the last poem the best.
And you have every right to. They're all beautiful, but I agree that the last one just took my breath away quite a bit. I want to thank you so much, Erin, for sharing this time with us, for reading from your work, for answering my questions. For those of you who are interested in learning more about Erin and reading her work, Clothesline is available to read and purchase on NiftyLit.io. It has been just an absolute pleasure to spend this time with you, Erin. We're so delighted to bring this piece into the world and share it with everyone. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.
You too. Bye.